Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor K. Srinivas from Pondicherry University. I teach philosophy at that university. I am the course coordinator for Indian religion and philosophy in the subject Indian culture. In this module, we are going to learn about the psychophysical practice of yoga. In that, we are going to focus on the following learning objectives, namely, what is yoga, epistemology, metaphysics, and the notion of God in yoga, and soteriology in yoga. And yoga is a technique or a method to control body and mind to achieve self-perfection. Practice of yoga for the sake of self-realization is something very important in the Indian philosophical context. The term yoga is derived from the Sanskrit root yuj, which literally means union. It is a spiritual union of individual soul with the spiritual soul. It also means to join or to yoke. As a matter of fact, it is a method that joins the finite spirit with the infinite or supreme spirit. In other words, yoga is self-realization in its widest sense of the term. This means the method of yoga consists of the methods of or practices leading to the union or self-realization, viveka jnana. There are evidences to show in the history of Indian culture that practice of yoga was predominant during Mohenjo-daro civilization. Yoga, as expounded by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra, is treated as an allied system of Sankhya by the classical Indian philosophers. Yoga Sutras, or the aphorisms of yoga, were composed by the sage Patanjali around 4th century BC. Vyasa, who wrote a commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras around 4th century AD. Yoga Sutras are divided into 4 important parts, namely Samadhipada, Sadhanapada, Vibhutipada, and Kaivalyapada. The first part deals with the nature and aim of concentration. The second part deals with how to realize this end. And the third part with the supranormal parts that one can acquire through yoga. And the fourth part deals with the nature of liberation and the reality of the supreme transcendental self. Now you see the picture of the sage Patanjali, who is the author of the Yoga Sutra. In its epistemology, yoga admits the following sources of knowledge. They are perception, pratyaksha, inference, anumana, and verbal testimony, shabda. The valid sources of knowledge, pramanas, wrong or false knowledge, viparyaya, empty concepts, vikalpas, sleep, nidra, and memory, smriti, are part and parcel of the epistemology of yoga. Basically, Atman is considered to be consciousness itself by yoga. There is absolutely no difference between Atman and consciousness. They are identical. However, we tend to speak of consciousness of Atman as if consciousness is an attribute of Atman, forgetting the fact that Atman itself is consciousness. According to yoga, Illusion is caused by 5 impurities. They are ignorance, avidya, false identification of oneself with objective world, or egoism, asmita. Then attachment, raga, is also one of the impurities. Hate, dvesha. Then self-attachment, abhinivesha, which is accompanied by the anxiety of death. Now, apart from these impurities, yoga also recognizes 5 levels of mental life. They are called chitta bhumi. These levels are caused by the predominance of different gunas. For instance, restlessness or kshipta is caused by the excess of rajas, one of the gunas. This is supposed to be the lowest mental level according to yoga. Then comes torpidness or mudha. The mind has more of tamas, which makes it ignorant, dull, and sleepy. Then, of course, you have the next higher stage is called distracted, vikshipta. This is distracted state of mind. And this distracted state of mind, although sattva is a dominating guna, yet rajas too asserts itself at times. Therefore, the mind gets distracted. The next higher stage is called concentration, ekagra. Here in this stage, the mind is completely dominated by sattva. The mind can concentrate on the object of its choice without any hindrance. The 5th and the highest stage is called restricted stage, niruddha. The mental modifications in this stage are completely arrested or stopped, though their latent impressions remain. Now, after recognizing these 5 levels of mental life, yoga tries to explain its metaphysical position. As indicated earlier, in Indian context, there is a close link between epistemology and metaphysics. We would not be able to segregate epistemology from metaphysics because the metaphysical considerations of any system are dependent upon the epistemological framework of that particular system. Coming to the metaphysics of yoga, yoga being an allied system of Sankhya, Sankhya believes that everything is under constant transformation, parinama. Both Sankhya and Yoga admit the existence of Prakriti, the primordial eternal substance or matter, to which all change is attributed to. They change only the modification of Prakriti, and all changes are ultimately attributed to Prakriti only. Sankhya does not discuss this relation between substance, dharmi, and its attributes, dharmas, at all. Now, Patanjali, on the other hand, tries to discuss this relation between substance and its attributes. This is something unique that we find in yoga. For example, water transforms into ice at a particular temperature. They are modification of substance, modification of quality, and modification of the mode of quality. the substance remains the same. The change occurs within the same substance. That substance is the individual Vyakti. Its accompanying qualities alone change, but substance remains the same. Substance possesses elements of stability in the object observed. Substance exists, whereas qualities subsist in substance. This is one of the most interesting features that you find in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. He does not say that qualities exist, since qualities are dependent on substance for their existence. He says that the qualities subsist in substance. Coming to God, yoga holds that God is Purusha, but of a special kind of Purusha, Purusha Vishesha. What kind of speciality is attributed to God in yoga system? God being omniscient, there is no knowledge greater than His. God is not touched by the 5 impurities, and He is completely transparent. Ignorance, sense of ego, desire, hate, and fear of death cannot be attributed to God. Also, He is not touched by the results of ethical actions and the potencies left by these ethical actions, karmashayas. Now, Patanjali does not offer any proof or proofs for the existence of God. Unlike Sankhya, he gave some descriptions about God and the advantages of meditating on Him. Meditation of God involves repeating His name and thinking of its meaning. It is argued by the former that scriptures are absolutely authentic and they say about God's existence. Therefore, God exists. More than that, Patanjali does not offer any other proof for the existence of God. For example, Vijnana Bhikshu, one of the interpreters of this yoga system, claims that men possess different degrees of knowledge. There must be some upper and lower limit for this. The upper limit of knowledge is possessed by God, and there is no knowledge greater than that according to Vijnana Bhikshu. Coming to reason and action. Yoga accepts the doctrine of karma and reincarnation. The moral actions leave their potencies, samskaras, in the impersonal reason. These potencies later on become the modifications of the creative energy of reason called buddhi or chitta. Thus, reason of every individual is modified in a different way according to the actions performed by the individual. Therefore, there is some kind of relationship between the reason and the action performed by the individual. The change in reason or shift in reason necessitates the shift in the action of the individual. Hence, the ultimate enjoyer is the I as the ego, and this I as the ego is the enjoyer, and it is the empirical I or the psychological I. Then coming to 2 important aspects of reason according to yoga. One aspect of it creates the world that is shared by all of us. The common world is the given world to all of us. The other aspect of reason makes the world different to each individual in terms of its enjoyability. My attitude towards the world is different from the attitude of some other person. Two persons may not look at the same world with the same attitude. For example, the potencies of moral actions accumulate together and constitute the reservoir of potencies. This reservoir of potencies becomes one of the afflictions, kleshas of reason, which create a distorted world of colorful objects. This part of reason is known as the reason of action potencies, according to yoga. These potencies produce their effects insofar as the original ignorance between the Prakriti and Purusha continues. Through the practice of yoga, the discrimination dawns on the individual and the ignorance is gradually dispelled. That is the purpose of yoga. Now, coming to the doctrine of karma, karma becomes a teleological aspect in yoga. Without any reference to God, yoga explains the cessation of these potencies through the practice of yoga. That is the significance of yoga. Now, coming to how to get rid of these potencies. Perhaps Patanjali introduced certain techniques of yoga. By practicing these techniques, we would be able to get rid of these potencies. For example, like any other orthodox Indian philosophical system, yoga also believes that the ultimate goal of yoga is to attain liberation, which is technically called samadhi in yoga system. Now, what is samadhi? Etymologically, the word means settling down of reason on something. It implies peace and steadiness. In other words, it is the settling of reason in itself. The practice of yoga is to stop or damp the function of reason. When these functions are stopped, reason becomes completely transparent, and there is nothing objective to show or to know. Such a state is technically called samadhi. To attain it is the ultimate goal of yoga. One had to attain samadhi. Now, the steadiness of mind is to control the mind. One easy method is to meditate on God, or one may practice measured inhaling and exhaling pranayama. Either you concentrate on God, or through practice of pranayama, you control your mind or your mental operations. When inhaling and exhaling are done in an irregular manner, its results are mental agitation. First of all, mind has to be fixed on the measure of breath controlling. Its agitation is minimized. Another way is to remove all attachments from mind in order to make mind steady. When we attempt to make reason steady, it becomes agitated and restless, kshipta. When a greater force is thrust on it to fix it, it becomes torpid, mudha, a tendency to fall asleep. When we still make greater effort, it becomes distracted, vikshipta. If you continue to put greater effort, then it becomes concentrated ekagra on the object of meditation. Perhaps this is the process that one has to undergo to make mind fixed or to make mind settled. Finally, when we make a steady effort to make our mind stay on in that state, it becomes restrained, niruddha, and all its functions automatically come to standstill. The last two stages are important for attaining samadhi according to yoga. Now, of course, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra also talks about Ashtanga Yoga or Eightfold Path. He suggests that there are 8 important steps or limbs to be practiced by an individual to perfect one's own body and also to perfect one's own mind. These practices or the limbs or angas of yoga are as follows. He talks about yama, which is nothing but self-control. Then he talks about niyama, which regulates life through certain rules. And then you have asanas. They are called the bodily postures. By practicing these bodily postures or asanas, you bring your physical body under your control. Then there is something called pranayama or the breath control, pratyahara. That means slowly and gradually you withdraw your senses from the external objects. Then comes dharana, wherein you fix your mind on an object of your interest or taste. Then comes dhyana, a kind of meditation. And finally, this meditation or concentration results in samadhi. Now, of course, this self-control is of 5 types. They are non-injury, ahimsa, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-acceptance of gifts. In other words, one should not accept anything that is an instrument of pleasure according to yoga. Then, of course, coming to niyama or regulating rules of one's own life. These rules include purification of body, both externally and internally. This purification starts with cleansing of body through washing and by taking clean and pure food. Internally, mind has to be cleansed by practicing friendship, kindness towards fellow beings, cheerfulness, and indifference to the voices of others. Apart from this, contentment, penance, by practicing austerities, regular study of sacred books, and meditation on God are also equally recommended by the yoga. Then, of course, as it is indicated earlier, asanas or bodily postures are absolutely necessary to keep one's body fit and agile, and such yoga is technically known as Raja Yoga. Then here you see different types of asanas, and these asanas make your body more and more flexible in the sense that the entire body is brought to one's own control. Hitherto, it is the body that controls us, but we need to bring the body under our own control. Coming to pranayama, to regulate our inhaling and exhaling, we need to practice a kind of a yoga. This is absolutely necessary to arrest mental agitations. Now, unless and until you arrest mental agitations, concentration is not possible. Apart from inhaling and exhaling, yoga also recognized the acts of retention of inhaled air in our lungs and emptying the lungs for some time without immediately inhaling after exhaling. All these four activities have to be regulated in terms of proper time intervals to make our mind more steady and concentrated. Then, of course, how is concentration possible? Only through pratyahara or withdrawal of senses. Suppose if your senses are focused towards certain objects, again mind becomes unsteady. When the senses are completely withdrawn, when they are made inwards through rigorous practice in order to make senses unite with their sources, perhaps mind acquires better concentration because senses are withdrawn from the external objects. Therefore, the senses become one with reason or mind. Here are some of the most important energy centers, the subtle system shown in this picture. Now, coming to concentration, dharana. Generally, concentration makes us fixing our inner sense on a desired object. It is the activity of concentrating or centering our mind. The object on which the mind concentrates may be an external object, an idol, or an image of God, or any part of one's own body. It is an important step towards meditation. Then comes dhyana, or meditation, in which the intensity of concentration increases. And the reason, or the state of reason, in which the mind completely concentrates on the object of its own desire, like a flow, like oil in which the drops cannot be distinguished from one another. Then, of course, you have samadhi, the final step. In this state of meditation, reason can distinguish between the object and cognition and also knows itself as knowing object. But in the state of samadhi, reason is completely absorbed in the object, that the object alone stands. The inner structure of the object reveals itself completely, whether it is physical object or one's own mind with its layers of the unconscious or somebody else's mind. Further, samadhi is classified into two kinds according to yoga: samprajñāta samadhi and asamprajñāta samadhi. In the samprajñāta samadhi, the consciousness of the object of meditation persists, and in the later it is transcended. In the state of samprajñāta samadhi, one who practices meditation and the object of meditation are fused together, yet the object of meditation remains. This stage is again classified into savitarka, savichara, sananda, sasmita. Savitarka state is the state in which the mind concentrates on the gross object of meditation. In the savichara state, the mind concentrates on the subtle or subtler object of meditation, like tanmatras. In the sananda state, mind concentrates on a still subtler object of meditation, that which produces joy. In the state of sasmita, the mind concentrates on the ego substance with which the self is generally identified. Then asamprajnata samadhi. It is the state of asamprajnata samadhi wherein the meditator and the object of meditation are completely fused together. No new mental modifications arise in this state. They are completely put down, niruddha, although their latent impressions may continue. This is the highest state of yoga which is difficult to attain. Such an experience cannot be described too. I think it is something like a mystic experience. After attaining this state, the body breaks down and the person in question attains liberation. Now, coming to the summary, as we have seen, as an allied system of Sankhya, yoga has its own epistemology and metaphysics, and it also well defined the role of God in its own system. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, we also come across the Ashtanga Yoga, or the eightfold path, which is practiced in the yoga system for tuning one's own body or controlling one's own body. Only by controlling one's own body, one can also control one's own mind. Unless both body and mind are controlled, concentration is not possible. For any sort of liberation, perhaps yoga is absolutely necessary. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna talks about the significance of Raja Yoga to attain the state of Sthita Prajna. And even Buddha recommended the yoga as an important aspect of one's own daily life in order to attain absolute concentration. Or it may be a prerequisite to attain nirvana. Therefore, the yoga provides a way to get oneself disentangled from such a state to attain liberation. Now, these are the most significant features of yoga system. For further reading and clarification, I request you to go through the e-text. Thank you.